In this demonstration, we're now going to build upon what we discovered in Azure Automation and extend it to Azure Automation DSC. If you remember from the Virtual Machines module, we created a desired state configuration module in PowerShell for installing IIS. Well, Azure Automation allows us to automate the installation of these DSC modules across multiple machines and also check that they remain in a consistent state. So let's head over to the Azure portal to begin. In the Azure portal, as you can already see, we're in our automation account that we created in the previous module. And if we scroll down, we can see we have these options under Configuration Management for DSC nodes, DSC configurations, a gallery again in preview currently, and DSC node configurations. So the first thing we need to do is add one of our configurations. So we go to DSC configurations, and we can go ahead and add a configuration. And in this example, I'm simply going to select the one we used in the Virtual Machines module. So I've got the Skylines IIS.ps1. In fact, if I right click it and edit it, that opens up and you can see we have our configuration called Skylines IIS. We have our node of localhost where we simply are enabling the Windows feature IIS, and we're going to enable ASP.NET 4.5 as well. So we can close that down. We're not going to make any changes to our DSC configuration. We simply want to apply it now from Azure Automation DSC instead of going to every single VM and putting it into that VM extension like we did in the Virtual Machine module. So I can select the PS1 file here and go ahead and select that, and it will populate this name. This has to match the configuration. So you can see in that PS1 file, my configuration name was also Skylines IIS, and I can give it a description as well. If I go ahead and click OK, that will create that configuration, and now I can select that configuration and I can choose to compile it. So I have to do this before I can put it onto one of my servers, and you can see it says, are you sure you want to compile this configuration? Any node configurations generated will be automatically placed on the Azure Automation DSC pool server. And this is the server that's going to essentially connect to the virtual machines and make sure all those configurations remain consistent. So we're going to go ahead and select yes to this, and that's going to compile that configuration. You'll see a job get queued up at the bottom here, and we'll fast forward a little bit here. It takes a few minutes for all this to complete, and then we will have our node configuration ready for us. Okay, and as you can see, that compilation job is completed, so we can exit this screen and go now to DSC node configurations, and you'll see that we have Skylines IIS.localhost. That's the configuration that we compiled. Now all we need to do is associate it with virtual machines that we want to apply it to. So I've got a test virtual machine all ready to go. If we go over to DSC nodes, you can see there's no machines already in there. We can simply select add an Azure VM, and it is possible to also add non-Azure VMs as well, but in my demo I'm going to choose Azure VM, and then we'll go ahead and select Windows VM 01, select this one and choose to connect it, and you can see it's actually deallocated right now. So first thing we need to do is go ahead and power that machine back on. So let's go over to Virtual Machines, go to Windows VM 01, and start that machine up. And again, I'll just fast forward here while that comes up and then head back to Azure Automation. Okay, that machine has successfully started back up, so let's go ahead and try that again. Let's hit Add Azure VM, select Windows VM 01, and we now have the option to click Connect. So we'll select Connect, and this connects it to this node configuration that we select in this drop down. So I'm going to choose Skylines IIS.localhost. I can choose how often I want to refresh. I can choose the configuration frequency, and I can choose the configuration mode. And this is very important. You can see the option here of apply and monitor, apply only. So that means it just pushes the configuration, as opposed to apply and monitor, which pushes it and will check it for consistency. And then a big one, which you need to be ready for, and certainly a lot of people will start with apply and monitor, but apply and auto correct means if somebody logs into the server, changes are set in manually that conflicts with the DSC configuration, when Azure Automation DSC goes and checks the configuration against the pool server, it'll say, nope, this isn't correct. I'm going to override what the person did manually and set the configuration back to how we set it here in Azure Automation. But I'm going to choose apply and monitor in my example. And a few other things here. You've got allow module override If you select this controls whether new configurations downloaded from Azure Automation DSC pool server are allowed to overwrite the old modules already on the target node. So if you've got old modules that you've already put on from a different version and you want to override them with this one, then that's something that you would select as well. Reboot if needed, that's if some of your configurations require that reboot, then it can execute that and then continue configuration. The last thing to mention is just that you do have this option of primary and secondary key. So there is the concept of keys in Azure Automation to basically know which Azure Automation is registered to and authenticated to run against those machines, and you can rotate those keys much like any other key. I'm not going to show you that just yet because I want to complete this configuration, but if you go back to Azure Automation, you'll have a section there called keys. You'll have your primary key and your secondary key, and you can rotate them. So you would basically then use your secondary key before you push and change your primary key basically. If we go ahead and select OK, that now connects that VM in and will apply that DSC configuration. So again, I'm going to fast forward here because it does take about 5 or 10 minutes for that IIS and ASP.NET configuration to apply, and we'll come back once we've got some data to show you. Alright, and after a little while we can now see that that VM is now connected, and you can see it's connected. There's an extension version there as well, so it's using the DSC extension to get connected in. And if we go back to Automation DSC now, if we go back to the account, and if we select DSC nodes, which we're actually already still on, you can see our Windows VM on the right hand side with status compliant. If we select this, we can now see, if we scroll down, status compliant, different times it's checked. These are the initial checks going on there, consistency in progress. And what you'll notice is every 15 or 30 minutes, depending on what you set your time interval at, you will see that these reports come in to say whether or not this VM is compliant with the configuration. And so this is the true power of Azure Automation DSC, because not only can we define a node configuration for our virtual machines, we can assign it to multiple virtual machines all in one go, and then we can continuously validate whether or not they are compliant. And this can also help with login, auditing, etc. And it can also all be fed into log analytics as well, which you'll see in the other modules. And with that, this concludes this demonstration and hopefully gives you a good sense of Azure Automation DSC and what you can do with it.